Fresh meat.
I've mentioned this before, but it needs repeating. Because of the boom of the video store, some flicks are always in tandem for a certain generation and age group. The catalog effect, or the Bowie effect, as I call it, is when you traverse through a body of work by an artist that changes somewhat drastically, or with directors and writers via film. But because you didn't live the passage of time yourself, you can easily judge the work based on merit over hype and anticipation. Time heals, as they say. Now for me it was Predator 1 and 2, Warlock 1 and 2, Ghostbusters 1 and 2, the first two Critters, and of course, both Gremlins. Now before anyone complains in the comments that this isn't horror, Gremlins 1 and 2 have horror elements, with the first leaning far more into them of course, but these movies have always had many different subgenres running through them, and this sequel turns all of them up to 11.
These go to 11.
Yes, it's not fully horror, but it is still present in the sequel, so please, let's just all come together on this and relax. Now, Gremlins 2 isn't hated, though for most of my life it was always kind of looked down upon. You know, lesser than.
Fuck you, blow me.
I find this sequel a fascinating entry, setting up the introspective weirdness that would define a chunk of the 90s. Like I always say, if you partake, pour yourself something nice and smoke 'em if you got 'em. So join me as I explore my love and adoration for my favorite creature and the wackiest sequel of all time, with Gremlins 2, The New Batch. I want to thank you guys for watching The Black Sheep and ask that if you enjoy our shows, please subscribe to our channel right now. Like this video and click on the bell so you can be notified each time a new video goes up. And now back to the show. Like the wise and sage Costanza learning the secret to life,
Every decision I've ever made in my entire life has been wrong.
Gremlins 2 looked at the original and did the complete opposite. The small town America, with all of its charm and old ways, replaced by the cold, hard city, concrete and innovation. The adventurous, whimsical, and suspiciously dark tone. Now a genre mishmash meta roller coaster cartoon. This is quite telling of our current times and a sad state of affairs when a sequel doing something different is inspected upon like a relic from a far distant time. The 90s.
Call me a dog.
Only Gremlins 2 didn't do the bare minimum. They made a great second entry that broke the sequel rules, while never truly looking down on itself. Director Joe Dante had no intention on making a follow-up. The first one was a surprise hit and Warner Brothers wanted more fast. So producer Mike Finnell and Dante were tasked with writing a follow-up for a flick that they clearly agreed didn't need it. And after some brainstorming sessions, they both realized that there wasn't a great way to move forward and walked away. Warner Brothers hadn't cracked the code on the Gremlins 2. I mean, they were putting up shit options like Mars and Vegas. Joe Dante has gone on the record saying this about Warner Brothers. They kept working for, as it turned out, several years trying to come up with a sequel for a movie that they really didn't understand in the first place. So it became very difficult for them to duplicate it since they didn't understand why it was successful at all. But Mr. Dante needed a hit, and a deal was made. Joe Dante got creative control and final say, as long as he just amped up the Gremlin action and brought back Zach Galligan and Phoebe Cates. Easy. In a move so punk rock he would get a countdown from Lee Ving himself. 1, 2, 3, 4. Dante took the novel approach of going meta, making a sort of anti-sequel. One that would comment on the state of film with cash-in sequels, mock Warner Brothers, while deconstructing and lovingly poking fun at the original. Think Matrix Resurrections, only good.
I'm sure you can understand why our beloved parent company Warner Brothers has decided to make a sequel to the trilogy. They informed me they're gonna do it with or without us.
Then maybe just don't make it. Meta's been around, of course, but this type of approach was somewhat unique, and not one you'd expect to infiltrate the second chapter of an adventurous family film. See, the meta subgenre is like found footage. It's an interesting concept that can easily collapse under its own weight, and it always tends to think it's smarter than it actually is. And for every good one, They're a triple that, shitting the proverbial bed. Gremlins 2 was built from the ground up with the idea of cheap sequels infesting this sequel. You could see a gremlin wearing an anti-Gizmo t-shirt. There's a famous scene where the Clamp security/tech team is ripping on Billy for the ridiculous Mogwai rules, or the real critic that disliked the original in this actual movie. Both a wink and a playful jab, though I should say I do see Dante giving the middle finger during the rules scene. It's an early jab at the trolls who overthink and take the fun out of everything.
And they cross the time zone. I mean, it's always midnight somewhere.
And of course, Hulk Hogan yelling at the Gremlins to put the movie back on. Gremlins 2 didn't invent meta, far from it, but found a way to construct a story around the idea of how dumb the idea of another story is. But here's the good part, it's without the need to be in on the joke. This works because it does the one thing many seem to forget. It doesn't matter what you're preaching, or how smart and wise you think you are. The only thing, the first and only rule that matters, is you must entertain. This takes a bigger is better approach, and though it's clearly being sarcastic, it leads to a style and tone that gives Gremlins 2 a leg to stand on. What I loved about the 80s and early 90s is that movies were made with a focus on this single entity. It wasn't commonplace, though there are outliers, of course, to think very far ahead with multiple entries, and how to keep the cash cow moving. But the freedom that Dante got let him experiment in ways that made an honest-to-God unique second entry. Going hard after the original, this starts off by killing Mr. Wing, putting Gizmo into animal testing and gene experimentation. And listen, I know this is the more fun entry, but I think people forget behind the cartoon aesthetic, it's still pretty mean, just in a more colorful way. The great Christopher Lee gets fried. We get more of that classic Gremlins murder, and Kate is nearly killed in an elevator crash, giving us a great gory sequence. And let's not forget, the Gremlins basically crashed the global economy.
We're advising our clients to put everything they've got into canned food and shotguns.
And the story is simple. Billy and Kate have moved to New York to start a new and promising career. We get a gremlin adventure in a skyscraper. I think the bar and theater scene from part 1, only half the movie and a lot crazier. Kind of like the underrated cocaine-fueled Predator 2, which did the location swap the same year. The change in scenery allowed for more experimentation and one hell of a family experience. Gremlins 2 is a charming beast that mocks anything and everything, yet gives us, the audience, the creativity and spirit that every goddamn rehashed sequel was missing.
Where the fuck do you get that stuff?
No, not you, Riggs. We all grew up with you guys, and Donner gave us a journey of a lifetime. There's a reason why that Keenan Peele skit felt so right. It really does feel like a kitchen sink approach that somehow worked perfectly.
You talking about a gremlin whose sole purpose in this film is just that he looks stupid as fuck? Yes, it can be in the movie, and it is in the movie.
Now, do I miss the Peltzer family? Of course. Hoyt Axton had a presence that was clearly missed. But this sequel gives us a well-rounded and layered cast sprinkled in. We get Christopher Lee, Robert Picardo, long live Voyager, the great Dick Miller, back as Murray, and that poor guy is shell-shocked from his original encounter.
What was that?
I heard it too.
Of course you heard it too. What does that mean?
Robert Prosky is Grandpa Fred, the depressed Sven Gulli knockoff that's over the hill and constantly depressed, and maybe the most relatable character in this movie.
People who watch TV at 3:30 in the morning aren't scared of the Wolfman. Only thing that scares those people is getting sober and finding work.
Zach Galligan and Phoebe Cates wisely return, giving us some hometown heroes to root for. Watching them deal with a building that's so state-of-the-art that it doesn't even work is enjoyable on its own. The corporate jabs here are sharp and brutally honest. If you ever worked for a big corporation, this bullshit jargon will hit close to home.
This is your problem right here. You only see your little part of it. I have to have a complete situational long-term overview outlook perspective. It's as simple as that.
And then there's small things like the fire alarm giving you the history of fire, before you burn alive, which is such a clever addition that most wouldn't even notice.
Fire, the untamed element, oldest of man's mysteries, giver of warmth, destroyer of forests. Right now, this building is on fire.
John Glover steals the show as the mystifying and surprisingly lovable Daniel Clamp. Someone who is clearly the villain, yet Glover plays Clamp with a boyish sense of self. Clamp, as written, comes off as an egotistical asshole, and yeah, he is, but Glover wisely plays against the page and brings an optimism that somehow puts Clamp as a man meaning well, and not the generic evil corporate overlord he could have been. And he's a clear mix between an 80s Trump and Ted Turner. Clamp's book even uses the same font as The Art of the Deal, and Clamp even tears up at his admittedly beautiful end-of-the-world broadcast, poking fun at the one CNN has. And maybe it's the rum talking, but Gremlins 2 has always belonged right next to the original. An entertaining sequel that pokes fun at technology, corporate interests,
Alert personnel, we have a career opportunity in level 7.
And its own legacy. Joe Dante and writer Charlie Haas put together something that took giant swings and landed every one. This ran as fast as it could away from a traditional follow-up, giving us one of the best damn sequels of the 90s. Meta insider commentary aside, at face value, Gremlins 2 personifies an ending of an era, a time and place that can't exist now, where sequels aren't planned ahead, no universe, no streaming spin-off, but one of the last eras where one could make something a little bit strange. Just violent cartoon monsters mocking anything and everything, going funny then gross, and ending in a musical number that goes off the deep end. Well, that's the review. So the next time your boss tries to tie in some new corporate language and conduct, or your sanity starts to crack, realizing social media is basically Clamp Center in app form, turn on all the lights, check all the closets and drawers, look under all the beds, because you never can tell. There just might be a gremlin in your house. Or worse, someone who just doesn't like Gremlins 2.